the Minister of Public Administration and Artificial Intelligence.
Mr. President, I bring greetings to you and congratulations on your magnificent appointment. First of all, I bring greetings as well to all of my hard-working colleagues on this side of the aisle, Mr. President. And Mr. President, let us be clear as we enter this political foray, because that is what it is, a foray. The Prime Minister, Kamala Persad-Bissessar, has won, together with the nation and together with all of its people, a resounding victory and I know, Mr. President, that members opposite are still licking their proverbial wounds. Because after April 28, many of these goodly gentlemen on the opposite side, from as early as April 27th, they were in the other place. And on April 28th, with the mandate of the people, Mr. President, they now reside in this familiar place. Shape up and ship out. That is what the people of Trinidad and Tobago said to them. Shape up or ship out. And indeed, they set sail because the people of Trinidad and Tobago found them wanting. And so, Mr. President, it gives me great pleasure, and it is indeed an honor and a privilege to be here with all of you learned colleagues as we look at what we can say is the supplementary appropriation of 2025. And so, Mr. President, I rise today not only with great responsibility as we debate this $3.14 billion supplementary appropriation. I rise not only, Mr. President, as the Minister of Public Administration and Artificial Intelligence, but also, Mr. President, with the voice of a new era in Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. President, the people of Trinidad and Tobago voted for better governance. That's right. They voted, Mr. President, for smarter leadership. Yep. And they voted, most importantly, Mr. President, for change. And on this side, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, we use the words of Mahatma Gandhi because we wanted to be the change we wish to see in Trinidad and Tobago. And that we did. From the east to the west, from the north to the south, the people of Trinidad and Tobago said, no more, no more, no more shall be the cry. And not to forget, my sister across the floor, Tobago also said, no, 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 not today. But, Mr. President, yes, allow me to preach and to educate and to edify you, sir. I'm glad I'm hearing the gentleman across the floor because the mayor became a mouse. The mayor became a mouse, right? And I heard that Sando West said, Daulat is the best, right? And well, for Senator Brown, he entered the round, but could not be found afterwards. That's what I heard. That's what I heard. Just give us standing order.
Mr. President, he asked for it.
Yeah.
We have a bill in front. The personal references are not necessary
Yeah.
in the Senate.
Yeah. All right. I know you're running up. You're running up, right? But don't take too long to bowl, right? So while you're coming up, let's go.
Mr. President, thank you. I'm guided, Mr. President. You see, the colleagues across the floor, they were sleeping at the wheel, much like they were sleeping this afternoon, for 10 years, Mr. President. And so when the people rose with a great voice, it often results in a bit of trembling. So I do understand, Mr. President, while colleagues across the floor feel a little bit intimidated by the power of my voice, Mr. President. But Mr. President, this is simply not a laughing matter, unfortunately. This is not a laughing matter because we are here to conduct the business of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And Mr. President, the reason we are here speaking to this bill is for no other reason than mismanagement, Mr. President. A past administration that neglected the people of Trinidad and Tobago. A former government, Mr. President, that vastly under-budgeted year after year after year. And I would dare say, Mr. President, that many of those under-budgeting activities may have been intentional, Mr. President. And so, like a good steward of this nation, this side, the United National Congress, for the next 5 years into the future, will right the wrongs of the past administration. Mr. President, you know, several comments were made in this debate, and I will get to the goodly Senator Dan Paul in a second. You thought you was getting away. I know you thought it was late and that we would spare you, but saddle up your boots. I'll come in for you just now. You see, Mr. President, take it as you like, sir. Mr. President, next to doing the right thing, the most important thing is to let people know you are doing the right thing. And that is a quote, Mr. President, by none other than John D. Rockefeller. Because we are here to let the people know that yes, we are planning for the future. Yes, we are doing the right things. But the former administration wants this government to accomplish what they should have accomplished in 8 weeks, what they could not accomplish in 10 years. And I would use the words of the good Senator, Mr. Arthur. Disrespected are the people that you failed to serve. over your tenure. Disrespected are the mothers and the children of our nation. Disrespected are the vulnerable in our society. Disrespected, disregarded, and that is why you are sitting where you are sitting today for no other reason than that, colleagues. And if I am preaching to you tonight, and you feel it in your heart, and you feel it in your soul, feel free to give a testimony. Feel free to give a testimony, and yes, my colleague, in a former incarnation, was a priest.
Point of order.
And we are learning.
46-1, point of order. Point of order, 46-1. I don't understand the relevance, Mr. President. Through you.
Just repeat your point of order.
Section 46-1, the relevance. We're discussing the finance appropriation bill.
Yes, I know what we are discussing, ma'am. I'm giving them a little space and be flexible, but let's get to the meat of it, please.
Mr. President, in these chambers, as you know, time goes quite slowly. So I do apologize if I've been taking a bit of time to get to the meat of the matter. But now I come, Mr. President, to the good gentleman across the aisle, the good Senator Dan Paul. Yes, you, sir. And I want to rebut a few of his misguided comments, because I didn't want to get into the economics that he has now forced me to have a look at. I want to submit to Mr. Dan Paul, Senator Dan Paul. Over and over and over he mentioned, this happened in May, that happened in May, May this, May that. And I say to you, may you never become a Minister of Finance again. Because the misrepresentation, Mr. President, you would swear that this economy has done extremely well under the tenure of the People's National Movement. But I want to bring to his attention, Mr. President, what is the stark reality? And what our country faced, and what the good finance minister faced upon entering office. Let me list them for you, and you can take notes. An overdependence on oil and gas. Overdependence. No plan in 10 years for what you call diversification. None. Senator, we have had an average annual GDP over a decade, on average, of approximately 0.2%, far below our regional counterparts. 0.2%, sir. 0.2%. And let me tell you again, how many deficits were part of that submission? How many persons have had the unfortunate circumstance of not being able to access foreign exchange, an equitable foreign exchange? How many businesses went out of business under your tenure? How many people suffered because of the economic inefficiencies and the lack of proper fiscal management by the People's National Movement? And you come here to speak about me, and what was there and what wasn't there? What was there 10 years is what you should consider, sir. 10 years of failure. Mr. President, rising inflation, and in particular the gentlemen across the room, they know that there has been rising food inflation. And who does food inflation affect, Mr. President? The most vulnerable in our societies. The most vulnerable, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President. Mr. President, did you know that health inflation also increased aggressively over the last 10 years? It means that persons could not afford, Mr. President, basic pharmaceuticals under the past administration. And so I find it convenient, Mr. President, that the goodly senator would stand with such umbrage and dictate to this government about fiscal prudence and fiscal responsibility and macroeconomic policy and microeconomic activity in Trinidad and Tobago, when investors have been leaving our shores, when foreign direct investment has said Trinidad is not a good place to invest, where crime has been rampant. Senator Dan Paul, do you invest your money where there is spiraling crime? I rest my case, Mr. President. Asked and answered, as they say. So, Mr. President, many points have been made by the Senator, the Honorable Senator, and I won't get into any more details. I'll leave it as that. I'll leave it right there. Right? I'll leave it right there. Mr. President, so we have a situation now where we are embarking upon an appropriation. And let us think critically, because this appropriation is not an appropriation of the government, really. It is an appropriation of the former government, a signal of mismanagement, of under-budgeting, a disgrace, Mr. President. And so, when I look across to the other side, Mr. President, I often wonder, what is there to smile about? What is there to laugh about? Show me the fruits of your labor. We're speaking about tax reform and revenue. Show me the fruits of your labor. We're speaking about supplementations in areas of need. Show me the fruits. We're speaking about 49 million that needs to be raised from the exchequer account. Why didn't you do it? Where were you? Where were you? Where were you? And that should be the headline in the newspaper, Mr. President. Where was this government, this former government, with all of these suggestions, all of these platitudes, for the last 10 years? They were in hiding, Mr. President. Maybe under a rock, or maybe under a fancy mansion. We don't know. But what we've inherited, Mr. President, what we've inherited is a deficit of trust. What we've inherited is a society teetering on the edge. What we've inherited is a temperature increase in our nation's population because they were fed up. They were fed up of a lack of governance. They were fed up of a lack of support. And so, Mr. President, I want to treat with some of the areas under the heads as it relates to the Ministry of Public Administration and Artificial Intelligence. And I want to tell the public servants in Trinidad and Tobago that we are working with them and we are working for them. And together, we can transform the public service. We can transform, Mr. President, and we will use the available technology. We will use artificial intelligence, and we will reform all aspects of public services to the redound of the benefits of the citizens that need it most. So I heard chatter about how. Mr. President, very recently we met, myself and the good minister in the other place, Homeland Security. And we spoke about a way in which we can digitize, first of all, an easy task. Entry and exit from Trinidad and Tobago. A physical form that many persons have had to use for a number of years. Even the gentleman across the floor, when they came from London and Sweden and Switzerland and all of these wonderful places that most of the population of Trinidad will never get to see. Mr. President, we plan to digitize entry and exit. Far too long, the people of Trinidad and Tobago have suffered. And Mr. President, this is a simple application. And when I had the meeting with the relevant authorities, Mr. President, I wondered, why? Why did this take so long? Why did the ideation take so long? Was it a lack of finances? And then when I looked at the amount of money that the former government spent, $600 billion in 10 years. I'll say it for the persons in the gallery. $600 billion. And it is a comedy fest. It is a comedy fest, Mr. President. But I'll tell you who was laughing after April 28th. We were laughing because the licking that they get, I hope that was funny too.
Point of order. Point of order. Point of order, Mr. President, please, 46-1.
Yes.
Thank.
Yeah, I think I don't think that at this stage and this time there's need for us to get into these things. You're going good in terms of that area that you were focusing on. If you could develop that area, that would be good. That's good.
Mr. President, thank you. I'm so guided. I'm so guided, Mr. President. Mr. President, there's a lot of crosstalk happening, and it is initiating from my colleagues on the aisle. So that is one of the reasons, Senator Murray, that you're having this difficulty to hear what I'm saying, because there's too much conversation happening there. So, Mr. President, I ask for your protection. I ask for your protection as I continue. So, Mr. President, I want to speak to the population of Trinidad and Tobago and let them be advised that it was not due to a lack of financial resources that their taps had no water, that their roads weren't fixed, that they received keys for housing but no house, that there was rampant crime in our society with no fixes. It wasn't because of a lack of resources. Mr. President, you see, who feels it most knows it. And that is the problem that we've had with the former government. They couldn't empathize with people, Mr. President. They didn't understand the common man, Mr. President. And so the intention was not there. The motivation, Mr. President, to do the right thing, it wasn't apparent. Because in their slumber, they couldn't find the convenience, Mr. President, to do the right thing. And so, this appropriation, though it is not our own, we will use it to the benefit of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. President, under the head 31 of the Ministry of Public Administration is a quantum here, Mr. President, of $325.8 million. And Mr. President, would you believe, Mr. President, and allow me to just find my notes. On the vote, Mr. President, I beg your protection from the chatter. I beg your protection, please.
I know it's late in the evening. People are a bit restless, I should say. Let's conduct ourselves consistent with the standing rules. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President. One of the items that this $300+ million, Mr. President, was meant to look at, to treat with, was an item called rent and leasing, accommodation and storage. And this came up in the SFC, Mr. President. And what we discovered, Mr. President, is that this was a sublease agreement from the Water Development Company Limited, the Port of Spain Water Development Company Limited. And Mr. President, it was a result of a bond of almost US $500 million. And as I dug into this particular item, Mr. President, what we discovered is that this bond was structured in such a way that it wasn't represented on a debt to GDP, because it was couched in such a way, Mr. President, that the government, Mr. President, is paying this exorbitant lease arrangement, government to government, so that it wouldn't show up on our debt service. And I said to myself, Mr. President, what other items has the former government hid from the population? Mr. President, and it reminds me of a pattern of activity by the former government, where it's almost as though they do what they want, when they want it, and no one must question them. And it's a pity that I didn't have an opportunity to speak in the TTRA bill, because much like this, Mr. President, there's a lack of transparency when it comes to the former government. Mr. President, I want to speak to another item. There's much has been said about the rentals and leasing as it relates to properties, Mr. President. And I won't say much. All I would say, Mr. President, is that this pattern described comes up again. A lack of urgency, Mr. President. A level of comfortability and complacency that has etched into their behavior over the last 10 years. And Mr. President, unchecked, this can lead to instances of overreach. And slowly, inch by inch, Mr. President, the former government lost its way. And I don't take ownership of that phrase. You must know where it comes from, I'm sure. And so, Mr. President, there's a lot of expenditure items that we've uncovered. One particular project, Mr. President, was parceled nice and neat as an upgrade under the Ministry of Public Administration. I am told, Mr. President, that this project has been running for over 24 years. 24 years, Mr. President. I am told that over the last administration, there was an upgrade. And that upgrade, Mr. President, would you believe, would cost the taxpayers over $60 million, Mr. President. Mr. President, I want you to juxtapose that against the environment where Forex is apparently scarce. And I want to understand what could inspire former ministers to engage in a process of this size and this quantum, this recklessly, Mr. President, for such a long time. And when we dug further, Mr. President, would you believe that this $60+ million was meant to be spent over a 4-year period to end in 2026? And would you believe, Mr. President, that in addition to that Forex bill, that the Ministry of Public Administration had begun and initiated with a vendor? Would you believe that in addition to that, the people of Trinidad and Tobago were also meant to pay 50 million TT dollars to operationalize? And I ask myself, how could a former government that is responsible, that is knowledgeable, that is interested in people, would think it logical to engage in such a process clearly that lacked a level of transparency, thank you, accountability, thank you. Mr. President, but in all seriousness, Mr. President, you can ask your former colleague and the Ministry of Public Admin. You can inquire with her if you like. So, Mr. President, what these two items, and I've only listed two, and I tell you, I will not investigate further. All I can say is that an audit is coming, and that audit, independent of me and this government, will reveal all. All will be revealed, Mr. President, not by us, by an independent audit. And then, maybe colleagues on the other side will be satisfied, because they weren't satisfied enough pillaging the Treasury.
Point of order, please. Imputing improper motives, I think.
No, yeah. Yeah. Yes. You were saying that is it an individual in this? No. Were you referring to an individual in this chamber pillaging the Treasury? No, I'm just asking.
No.
Wait. You see, imputing improper motives must be related to a member, a sitting member of the Senate. If you are not a sitting member of the Senate, you can speak to that issue, but you take responsibility for what you would have said. So when you talk about imputing improper motive, it must be either concerning a member of this chamber or a member of the other chamber. Other than that, you have absolute freedom of speech in this House. Continue.
Mr. President, thank you. Mr. President, I must say, in the time that I've spent in this good Senate, I've never once had an independent bencher interrupt so many times.
Please. Yeah. Listen, let us not go there. Any member, whether you're an opposition member, an independent member, have a right to invoke standing orders. So let us do not get involved in that kind of behavior. Please. Everyone is entitled, including your good self, to raise a point of order. You do not identify a point of order with whether you're an opposition member, an independent member, or a government member. So don't go there. Let us conduct ourselves professionally. Please, continue.
Mr. President, thank you. I am indeed guided. I will move on, Mr. President. Mr. President, how much time do I have left?
I think that you just have about 3 minutes.
3 minutes?
So wind up here.
That should be sufficient. We talk about a lot more as well. So, Mr. President, the Ministry of Public Admin and Artificial Intelligence will indeed collaborate with many other ministries over the course of this government's time. And we intend to modernize, to digitize, to transform the public service. We intend to do so in a strategic manner, Mr. President. We intend to do so in a planned, scheduled approach, Mr. President. And most importantly, Mr. President, we intend to do so to the benefit of those persons that put us in these chairs and in this chamber. And that is one thing, Mr. President, we on this side do not forget. The government is meant to serve the people and not the other way around. And I would encourage members across the floor to contemplate in their private time, maybe investigate, maybe their behavior over the last 10 years. Maybe there were improvements that could have been made. And maybe a conscience might develop in that quiet time. And hopefully, Mr. President, the people of Trinidad and Tobago will benefit from such contemplations. And so, Mr. President, we are about accountability. We are about delivering results. And most importantly, Mr. President, we are here to inspire hope to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, led by a leader, a prime minister, Kamala Persad-Bissessar, who indeed inspires hope and will continue to inspire members of the cabinet. And we will do the good of the people, Mr. President, in all things.
Okay, thank you.
And so, I thank you, Mr. President.
Yeah, thank you.
I thank indulgence at such a late hour of all members of the chamber. It is indeed my honor and privilege to be here.
Right.
And with those short words,
Thank you. I now recognize Senator Janelle John Baig.
Mr. President, I thank you for allowing me to make a contribution to this debate. It is now 11:06 p.m. I know we're all, to use the words of Senator McNeish, on fumes. Oh, yeah. So I intend to just make 5 or 6 quick points. I will not belabor them, okay? Mr. President, the government has premised this request for supplementation on what they would label as purposeful under-budgeting by the PNM. It was said by, I believe it was the Honorable Dr. Kennedy Sawat Singh, that the government purposely under-budgeted, then was forced or had to achieve its goals by cutting expenditure that resulted in arrears, and therefore we just decided to stop meeting our obligations. That comment was reinforced or underscored by the last speaker, who again spoke to this supposed mismanagement of our finances by the PNM government. Mr. President, my question is simply this. Why was that assertion necessary? Why was it necessary to cast these aspersions as it relates to this request for supplementation? Mr. President, a request to supplement a budget is not unique to the PNM government. Every year, even when this current government was the government in its last dispensation, they too made a request for supplementation. So there was absolutely no need to frame this request in this way. Mr. President, it's simply this. A budget is an estimate. It is an estimate of your expected income. It is an estimate of your expenditure. As it relates to the national budget, the estimate of the income is really based on, primarily for us, our energy sector. As it relates to our expenditure, it's based on past or recurring expenses and what you would envision you would want to use to develop the country further. So it's an estimate. And Mr. President, sometimes your estimate may be wrong because you have unexpected events. A classic example of such an event is COVID. When the government made its estimation in 2019 for the 2019-2020 year, it was in nobody's contemplation by the next year the whole world would be thrown into a pandemic. Therefore, you'd have to supplement. I believe it was last year or the year before, the government sought supplementation in Tobago because of an oil spill. Who can foresee that? So, Mr. President, my short point there is that a supplementation is not a bad thing. You don't have to try and explain it away by using terms like mismanagement. It's not necessary. And, Mr. President, my second point is this. The Honorable Dr. Sawat Singh would have said there was very little growth in Trinidad and Tobago in 2021 to 2025. Again, he sought to make it, or sort of frame it as if we were unique in that regard. Trinidad and Tobago is not unique in that regard. Mr. President, we, like everyone else, all the countries in this world, were faced by geopolitical factors that we had no control over. There's the tensions between other countries. That affects us. We have supply chain disruptions, economic slowdown in other major economies. There's basically an elevated global inflation. So that little growth, as he would describe it, again, is not unique to Trinidad. Central bankers and policymakers across this world are facing this very hard task of stabilizing prices without stifling economies. I would like to say that numbers are what you make it. And I would like to just read a short excerpt from the KPMG report on, or their commentary on the Trinidad and Tobago 2025 budget as it relates to this little growth. It was indicated on page 8 that recent data underscores a steady recovery, with GDP growth reflecting increased economic activity and confidence. For 2024, real GDP growth has improved to 1.9%, marking 3 consecutive years of positive growth as our economy saw a growth of 1.3% in 2023, building on a 1.5% increase from 2022. This trend indicates a revival in economic activity, enhanced confidence, and a favorable outlook for our economic environment. Mr. President, does that sound like mismanagement to you? It doesn't sound like that to me. And Mr. President, as I said before, that number, those numbers, that trend in growth is a worldwide trend. Again, I would want to refer to 2 other reports, some KPMG reports. I'm reading, again, some excerpts from the executive summary from the World Outlook for October 2024. It said there that global growth is expected to remain stable yet underwhelming. At 3.2% in 2024 and 2025, the growth projection is virtually unchanged from those in both the July 2024 World Economic Outlook and update on the April 2024 World Outlook. In the executive summary for April 2025, it said, following an unprecedented series of shocks in the preceding years, global growth was stable yet underwhelming. So again, Trinidad is not unique as it relates to the level of growth identified. So I'll move on to my 3rd point. And as it relates to my 3rd point, actually, I will turn to the actual bill. What we are here to discuss. Supplementary funding of expenditure. Mr. President, as I said before, supplementation is not a bad thing. But supplementation should not be in a vacuum. So I have no problem supporting a request for supplementation, but it's simply this: I have questions. The bill does not provide sufficient information for me in certain areas. And I would focus on one of these areas. It's fast becoming one of my favorite areas to talk about: health. So health received there was the largest request for supplementation was under Head 28, Health. The request was for $7.75 billion. And again, it was stated that the request is because of underfunding by the last administration and a lack of fiscal management. Mr. President, I think in the midst of all the pontification by the last speaker, he mispronounced the word prudent. Because the management of the economy by the last administration could only be described as prudent, please, Mr. President. The truth of the matter is, the last administration was very much invested in the health of this country, or healthcare in this country. Mr. President, the budgeted amount for healthcare in 2024 was approximately 15% of our revenue. That is an increase from 7% of our revenue in 2002. Again, does that sound like mismanagement? Does that sound like a government who is unconcerned with healthcare? No. Yes. Mr. President, the last administration spent a significant amount of money on free public health care. Again, if we look at what it was budgeted for, health care, I believe, was, I think it was the number 1 or 2, or the second, received the first or second largest, well, not just the supplement, the amount budgeted for in the last budget. So again, even, sorry? Allocation, sorry, thank you for that. Allocation, it's now 11:15. That allocation, over the years, the PNM administration has used the allocation for health for a variety of large infrastructural projects, amongst other things. Cancer Center in in South Trinidad. The Augustus Long Hospital was repurposed so that the people of South Trinidad wouldn't have to drive all the way to North Trinidad in order to get critical treatment for cancer. Then we have the Arima Hospital that was built at a cost of $200 million less than was budgeted for by the PP administration. We have the Diego Martin Health Center that was opened in October 2022. We had the renovation of the old San Fernando Hospital wing. And what I think is the newest one, the new Sandy Grande Hospital. Mr. President, when I mentioned in my maiden contribution about the good health care that I received in our public health institutions, it was scoffed at. Imagine that. Me saying that I got good health care was scoffed at. Well, Mr. President, I don't know what they will do when I tell them this other thing, though, about the good health care that one of my family members received in the new Sandy Grande Hospital. I can't imagine the derision I would receive for that. Because, Mr. President, just this year, one of my family members spent 4 weeks in the new Sandy Grande Hospital. Mr. President, do you know how much it costs for just 1 day in a private health institution? He spent 4 weeks there, 1 week in intensive health care, in the healthcare unit, I should say. I am happy to report again that he is out of there today. And I want to thank the last government for the investment it has made in healthcare. So, Mr. President, I have no problem with supplementing health care in this country. But my question is this.
Good druggist minister.
My question is simply this. When I look at what is being requested here, we are asking for under head 28, it's $7.2 billion. That's what I'm reading there. All these commas, it's $7.2 billion. $7.2 billion. So when you are asking me for $7.2 billion, Mr. President, it is 11:18.
Yeah, please.
Sorry, please. Sorry.
Yeah, please. I'm getting a lot of humming coming. So please allow Senator Bates to speak in silence. Continue.
7.2 million. 7.2 million. Sorry. Yes. No. It is, yeah, 7.2 million, sorry. So yes, million. 7.2 million is the request, and the allocation was 7.5 billion. So we're asking for 7.2 million, and that is still no small amount. So when you're asking for that amount of money from taxpayers, then you should explain what is it really for. So I see some in the, under head 28, there's some figures here and some short explanations. So I'm happy to endorse the requests, but I just have a few questions about some of them. For example, I see here short-term employment, $2,639,800, and it says for a cadre of contract officers, and they have listed 4 titles: senior pharmacist, quality officer, food and drug officer, and legal officer. Now, I just see 4 titles there. But I wouldn't want to believe that it's 4 individuals, because you're asking for $2.6 million for 4 individuals for a 5-month period. I just think more explanation is needed there. How many individuals are you actually asking for money for? How much? And are these new workers that you all are now hiring between May and September, or is this a continuous employment? These are the sort of questions. When I started to interrogate the requests, I started to ask questions. Then I see drugs. To facilitate, they're asking for $353,701,400. So they're asking this to facilitate payments to NIPDEC for current year and previous years. Yes, for current year and previous years outstanding invoices for pharmaceutical and non-pharmaceutical items. So again, my question is just simple. I just wanted to know how much is actually in arrears and how much are for current needs, new needs. Again, why was this not? I'm hearing figures being thrown across the aisle, but you know, it would have just been simpler to put that in the bill instead of shouting it at me now. That is not appropriate. But anyway, I wouldn't go any further. Then I see under Northwest Regional Health Authority, 76.5 million, right? I am seeing it saying there, to facilitate part payment of outstanding trade payables, no problem. And then I see for expansion of services in 3 local health centers for the period June to September. Again, I'm just wondering to myself, because you know I had already said it before, I actually use my local health center, right? So I'm curious, what are the expanded services? Is there going to be a duplication of services that are being offered by the hospitals? What is this expansion we are talking about here? And I see the figure of 3.47 million. And the thing is, I see that figure repeated in the request under Eastern RHA. The same thing, I just say 3.47 million for expansion of services for 3 health centers. Same thing, North Central RHA, 3.47 million for expansion for figures. And my question is, I just found it very curious that the 3 RHAs are saying they want the exact figure for 3 health centers for these mythical or mystical expansion. I just find it very curious. Is it that you all just slap figures in here without consideration of the actual needs of each RHA? Or it just happened that each RHA needed $3.47 million for 3 health centers in each region? I am just asking questions. Again, if the answer could have been put in here, it would have been easier, instead of the crosstalk that I'm hearing now. So I'm moving on to the other area. On the Honorable Dr. Kennedy Sawat Singh would have said, Swart Singh, I'm so sorry. As I said, you know, you were my first minister, so I apologize for that. So Mr. Kennedy, Dr. Kennedy Sawat Singh would have indicated that there's going to be a focus on economic diversification. He spoke about special innovation, AI, fintech, no, special innovation zone, sorry. AI, fintech, biochemical industries, development of a knowledge-based industries, all that sounding really, really good. I like where we're going. But when I look at the supplementation, I see that you're asking for mere $278,937,000 for development in the supplementation. Perhaps maybe this 8% allocation is so small because maybe, I don't know, it could be one of 2 things, that the allocation made by the past administration in the budget was sufficient. That is one example, or maybe the focus for development might come later on, I don't know, not clear. Again, the Honorable Dr. Kennedy Sawat Singh would have indicated that, this is not intentional, I promise you, but it's 11:24 p.m. Please, I beg. Yes, I'm not, there's no disrespect on my side with that. But he would have indicated that tourism is usually ignored. He described it as an ignored area. And he indicated some things that they'd want to do with tourism. But again, no allocation for tourism in this supplementation. But again, it's perhaps the allocation that was made in the budget was sufficient. That could just simply be it. And one other thing that I noticed when I was looking at this bill, there were lots of references to a requirement for money for short-term contracts. I see it on the Head 12, that's the Public Service Appeal Board. I saw it there. I saw it in the the head for health. I saw it in, which is head 28. I saw it in a couple areas. And it stood out to me because I know that the government, for the last 10 years, have been harping on and on that they have a problem with short-term contracts. And when I was looking at this supplementation, in some areas, I couldn't quite decipher if the request was for new short-term employees, which would go against their stated position for years and years, or maybe it was employees that were there before. Again, not clear. So my thing is, it's simply this. When you come to ask for taxpayers to give more money, make it clear what it's really for. And with those short words, I thank you.
Senator Brian Baig.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, let me take this opportunity to thank the Honorable Prime Minister, Kamala Prasad-Bissessar Senior Counsel, for seeing and having faith in me and appointing me here as a member of this bench. A great bench, I must say. And I also, sir, want to take this time to congratulate you, sir, on your elevation as Senate President. I have known you a very long time, sir, and you're a man that teaches well. And I'm happy that you are the best person for that chair. Congratulations again, sir. Let me take this opportunity as well, Mr. President, to thank the Minister of Finance, and as well as my colleague, Senator Swarting, Minister in the Ministry of Finance, for bringing a very good and excellent presentation to this House. Mr. President, on the 28th of April, this country felt a great movement. And that movement was the removal of the People's National Movement. And seeing the election of the United National Congress and Kamala Prasad-Bissessar as Prime Minister of this country for a second time. Mr. President, on the 29th, this country felt a breather. People felt easy. People felt a bit light. Because you know why? There was no more People's National Movement in government, sir. No more. People saw that there's now going to be good governance in Trinidad and Tobago. That is what they voted for. And I can tell you that, sir, because so far, what we have brought into this House, we have had promises made and promises delivered. Children's Life Fund, TTRA is no more, and more is to come, and more will come with this government. Because, Mr. President, when the UNC wins, everybody wins. Mr. President, I must say, oh, my pen went flying. Mr. President, I will say to you, you know, I am a cricketer. So I am like Michael Holden. My run-up will take a little long. But you will see, you might hear some bouncers coming and some Yorkers will be delivered tonight. Mr. President, we have an Attorney General in this country who said, and I want to agree with him, he's going to war, and I will go to war with him. We will go to war with him when we say we are going to fight crime, and we're going to fight especially white-collar crime in this country, sir. We will make sure of that, Mr. President. Mr. President, we want to remind this country that in 2010 to 2015, we built hospitals, we built schools, we built roads. But after that, in 10 years, what was there? There was no roads. There was no hospitals. We built a children's hospital and they refused to open it. It took a pandemic for them to build it, to open it, sorry. We must never let them forget that. We built police stations. What did they build? Nothing. Nothing they built. They didn't even build hope. I listened to my good friend. I took some notes, but not much. She said, blame COVID for how the economy went. She said, blame political tension. But I want to remind my good friend that the economy of this country was already crashing before COVID. The economy of this country was crashing before Ukraine war. She talked about health care. Granted, she got good health care. She said she got good health care. Senator, my apologies. Honorable, my good friend. I could talk about health care too. For 2016, I stayed 9 days in Port of Spain General, And I could tell you, that was no holiday for me. There were times there was no needles. There was no drips. And I had to wonder, well, woe is unto me, Lord, am I coming out of here? But thankfully, my Lord saw it through and I came out. So, we must understand that the economy in this country, before 2025, was already being crashed by no other than the People's National Movement. And only the PNM is to blame for that. So, Mr. President, we have to also talk about why as well we have to ask for money. Why it is certain funds are needed. Mr. President, we all heard about some figures. We heard some figures about what was happening on a golf course, Mr. President. Mr. President, we heard about some figures of legal fees, Mr. President. Mr. President, it was damning to hear of some of these legal fees that was being paid. That is why we have no money in this country. Imagine, you have fees being paid such as $38 million to a former Attorney General of this country. You have as well $29.3 million being paid to one Gilbert Peterson, senior counsel. And that is a friend of a former prime minister. You know, I gotta say former now. Mr. President, if such monies were not being paid, we would have had monies to maybe put beds in a hospital. We might have had monies to make sure a man could get a needle to chuck in his hand. But you know, Mr. President, you know all these figures I saw, fees being paid. I saw two names that came up that shocked me. And I said, wow. I know these gentlemen very well. I used to be there, I used to be there. But one thing I will tell you, Mr. President, I am one man, that I am proud to be a member of the United National Congress. I will never, to keep a job, beg for a work. Or I will never try to say, well, I come to give my service to hope I can get some form of briefs. I'll never do that. I will never, ever do those things. For those gentlemen, all I have to say, I can't say the word, Mr. President, because they say that such word is unparliamentary. But all I will say to them is that those persons are ungrateful, because we know how they reached there and we know what they had to do. Mr. President, with money like these, the figures that were revealed, when people can't even get a food card, people can't get a hamper, people can't get normal day workings of trying to get sustenance because money was wasted, Mr. President. Mr. President, imagine they had to pay over $1 million in the Jayawanti Ramdas matter. And you know why that did that? She had to go to court. And she win. Because why? They're trying to hide something. Well, they had to hide. Let the lady do she job. Maybe let her do she job. Maybe things would have not been soon. But because of that, that is why all are there, and that is why we are here. Mr. President, let's remember too, there was something called the missing file. And it cost taxpayers, and I want you to hear this figure, Mr. President, $2.3 million, for a missing file matter. And that, There were damages to be paid, and I want you to hear these figures, my colleagues. $20 million worth of damages, all because of, let me tell you why. It was because of recklessness, negligence, and gross incompetence coming out of the office of the Attorney General, sir. That is why. And that is why as well, the people voted against it with a landslide victory to the UNC. We must never let them forget that. They were busy crashing this economy, Mr. President. They were involved with dealings that can only be deemed as, and could be deemed and called corrupt. I support the Attorney General when he made a statement by saying the feeding frenzy is over. And I am saying it's time to put it there and let them know no more feeding will happen. Mr. President, could you imagine that you have to hear another figure of 20, I told you 29.3 million was a man by the name of Gilbert Peterson. But what about the pariah divers, Mr. President? They got nothing, no money to them, and they were treated with scant courtesy, even their families. I say shame upon the PNM and shame upon you all, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move to our courts and access to justice. Mr. President, as an attorney at law, I believe in our justice system and the access to justice. I must commend the Prime Minister for creating the Ministry of Justice. As any modern society, a Ministry of Justice is vital. It is to ensure that our justice system in the country flows smoothly. But you know who didn't think of that? The PNM. Because when they came into office, they closed it down and they shut it down. And that's what they're good at doing, shutting down everything. They shut down Petrotrin, they shut down all kind of, they like the shutdown thing. Could you imagine, my friends? We have places in this country, such as Cedros, Point Fortin, Moruga, that does not have a magistrate court. Those persons have to go far to get justice in this country. They have to go far. But I will tell you, justice is delayed is justice denied. And that is why we are coming to fix that problem. Mr. President, we campaign on speedier justice, and just as you saw, we were able to bring promises fulfilled. We will fulfill this promise as well. We will do it. Mr. President, I want to move on as well to education. I am a person that believes in education. I come from a family that says education is key. That is why I am a practicing attorney today. God bless my mother. She made sure I became a well-educated young man. Mr. President, when we were in government before, we built close to 100 schools. Mr. President, when they came into office, so much of those schools, they did not finish them. They left them there to grow vine and bush. I don't know what it is with the PNM that they don't like to open schools. They showed the history with it, with Beach High School, and I'm going to tell you of one that one school that did too, in the constituency of St. Joseph. My good friend Kennedy Swartzing knows this school, Senator Swartzing. St. Joseph Secondary School was built by our government, and they left it to be, as I said, with vine and bush and other persons to occupy.
Relevant.
Yeah, I think he's talking about education, and I think that is part of it. Yeah, no, he's making it. Go ahead. You have my gift.
Thank you, Mr. President. You see, Mr. President, when we start to show them the truth of what the kind of things they did, the type of wickedness that they did. So, Mr. President, that school, St. Joseph Secondary, families came to us and said they want the school to open. Monies were spent. But you know what they did? They left it alone. But on April the 28th, you know what they said? We will get rid of the PNM in St. Joseph, and we voted in an MP and a government. A very good working MP, my name of Devish Maraj. And that school, we will make sure that it gets opened back. Mr. President. Mr. President, we must understand that we are a government of making promises come true. Mr. President, I will also talk about the fact that monies has been allocated towards the laptop programs. Mr. President, I know they don't like to hear about laptops, because they ensure that children don't get laptops. But we under Kamala Prasad ensure that all children will receive a laptop in this country. All children, all. Because people deserve, their children deserve it. I believe someone had asked, well, so a man from the West, would their child get? Everybody will get, because a child is entitled. A child must receive these things, Mr. President. And that's why there's a request for 76 million. So in case you was wondering if I'm talking about the bill, they asked for that. Check the bill now, man. All right? So, Mr. President, we are at this stage because they put this country in this stage. They are the reason why we had to come and make these requests. It's nobody else, and they must take blame and they must take ownership for what they did this country in the last 10 years. They must do it. They must take ownership of it. So, Mr. President, I will say again that when the UNC wins, everybody wins. Mr. President, when the UNC wins, the children of this country will win. When the UNC wins, public servants will win. Mr. President, as I said, all will win, and they will win with the UNC and Kamala Prasad Bisesa, Mr. President. Our Prime Minister will ensure the monies of this country is spent wisely. We didn't spend money on Casabon paintings. We didn't spend money willy-nilly. We will spend it properly, because we know when we have the people's money in our hands, we must spend it properly. That's why they have us here. The country has the faith in us. The country has the trust in us. And they have the trust in Kamala Prasad Bisesa. And that is why we will ensure this country receives great governance. Mr. President, I will close by saying to this nation, you are in good hands. Because have no fear, Kamala Prasad Bisesa and the UNC government is here, and we will win, and you will win with us, Mr. President. And I say to my good friends, our new friends, when they see for a fact as to what the PNM is, I will tell you the United National Congress under Kamala Prasad Bisesa is open to all of you, and you are welcome to join us. My friends, Mr. Speaker, with these few words, I thank you.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I am extremely happy to now rise and beg to move that the Senate now adjourn to Monday, the 30th of June, 2025 at 10 a.m.
Honorable Senators, the question is that this Senate do now adjourn to Monday, June the 30th, 2025 at 10 a.m. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. This Senate now stands adjourned to Monday, June the 30th, 2025 at 10 a.m.